Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the sixth meeting of discourse analysis. Today we are going to learn about linguistic forms and functions in discourse analysis. So let's just start. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Linguistics are divided into two, which are formal and functional. For formal linguistics, we learn about the formal rules about the structures in language. There are phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. In phonology, we learn about the sound or the phonetical aspects of a language. And then for morphology, we learn about the form of words or the structure of words. For syntax is the structure of language, and then the semantics is the form of the meaning. For the functional linguistics, we learn the functions of language or how we use language in our life. There we learn pragmatics, sociolinguistics, psycholinguistics, and discourse analysis. And these four are just examples because there are still a lot of studies that is related to the functional linguistics. For example, forensic linguistics or translation, etc. For discourse analysis, the analysis of discourse is the analysis of language in use, because it is a functional linguistics, right? So in analyzing a discourse, we not only analyze the form of the language, but also what the language is used for. Not only the form, but also the function. Next is the function of language. We have two functions of language according to Brown and Yule, which are the transactional function and interactional function. For the transactional function, it means that how we transact or how we deliver the message to the listener. For this function, the speaker has to think of the most efficient way in order to transfer the information. The speaker has to make sure that the listener receives the same message as what he or she delivers. And then the speaker should make what he or she says or writes are clear. So, in order to fulfill the transactional function of a language, we should make sure that everything that we deliver to the listener is clear, so that the listener has the same message as what we are thinking. It is important that the recipient or the listener gets the informative detail correct. If the message is not properly understood by the listener or the recipient, there will be unfortunate or even disastrous consequences in the real world. For example, a cop that gives directions to a traveler. So we can assume that if the cop delivers the wrong message while giving the directions, consequently, the traveler will get lost, for example. That is the unfortunate effect. Or the other examples are a doctor that tells a nurse to administer medicine to a patient, etc. The next function of language is the interactional function. For this interactional view or function, language is used to establish social relationship. In this function, the speaker wants to establish and maintain social relationship through an interaction. The speaker doesn't primarily aim to give information, and the speaker indicates that he or she is ready to be friendly and to talk. So, for the transactional function, we have to make sure that our information is correct. However, for the interactional, the message or the information does not really matter because our main goal is to be friendly or to make a social relationship. For example, when lining up or queuing, it's casual for Indonesian to comment about how long the line is to open a talk with a stranger. So maybe when you are lining up, suddenly the person in front of you says to you that, "Oh, antriannya panjang ya," or "Aduh, udah lama ngantri, kapan ya?" gitu. So that person doesn't really want to give you information that the line is long. It is because you yourself can see that the line is long, right? But he or she just wants to be friendly to you, although you are a stranger. Maybe he or she wants to kill the time or just wants to make a social relationship. That is the interactional function. Another example is in British English, it is casual to talk about the weather to a stranger. "Oh, nice weather, is it, right?" That is casual for British English. And then next, we're going to learn about the differences between spoken and written discourse. We know that the form of discourses, there are two, which are spoken and written discourse. So are they the same or is there any differences between them? So first is from the manner of production. For spoken discourse, it is produced by voice as well as facial expression, tones, and gestures. So in a spoken discourse where we can see the speaker, maybe we can also analyze the facial expression and the gestures. But in a spoken discourse where we cannot see the speaker, for example, in a podcast, we can analyze the words and the tones. So it is not only the voice or the words that we analyze, but also the tones. For example, if we are talking to young children or small children, we usually tend to use high-pitched voice, right? For example, "Halo anak-anak, apa kabar?" Something like that. Our goal is to make the children excited so that they can pay attention to what we are talking about. Or when we give speech to older people, we need to make sure that our tone is warm or friendly to sound very polite to older people. Or if we give a speech about something educational or in academic situation, we need to give speech in lower voice to sound professional or to sound educated. So the facial expression, tones, and also gestures are also important in spoken discourse. And then the speaker has to control the production of communicative systems and also processes that production under circumstances or on the spot. We have to control and monitor the word choice on site and at that very moment. which is why spoken discourse is considered more demanding or more challenging. It is because the speaker cannot delay what has been said, right? Maybe the speaker can clarify after the speech. However, the speaker cannot delay what has been said at that very moment. However, there is also an advantage of spoken discourse. It is that the speaker can observe the listener's reaction. So we can adjust how we deliver the message in our speech based on the listener's reaction. For the written discourse, it is produced by writing, and it doesn't really consider the facial expressions, tones, and gestures. We describe all those in our writing, which is why this is considerably less demanding or less challenging. It is because we can delete what we have written, unlike the spoken discourse, right? Or maybe while we are writing a book or a novel or an article, we know that there are editors that can revise or edit our writing before we publish what we have written. And then, however, the disadvantage of written discourse is that the writer cannot really observe the reader's reaction. The writer can observe the reaction after the writing is published, right? But in the process of the writing, we cannot observe the reaction of the readers. So that is the disadvantage of written discourse. The next is the representation of discourse, which is the text. So text is not only written because there is a spoken text too. The notion of spoken text is a verbal record of a communicative act. So the notion of text here is something that is recorded. There is a record of the text or the discourse that is spoken or written. The extraneous to the text, such as coughing or vehicle sounds or any sounds that is not related to what the speaker is speaking, are not part of a spoken text. Those are just the extra. Those are something that we do not need to analyze. So if you want to analyze a spoken text, you have to make sure that you make a written transcription. You have to write everything that's being spoken by the speaker. And then you have to annotate or take notes according to your interest. So which part of that spoken discourse that you want to analyze, you have to take notes on those parts. For example, the spoken text is a speech that is recorded, and then television, because it is being aired, it means that it is recorded also, or a telephone conversation that is recorded, and podcast that is published, etc. So we have to have the record of this verbal spoken text. For the written text, the notion of written text is a printed record. Printed record here doesn't always mean that we have to print the written text with a printing machine. It's not always from the printer, but if we write down something using our hand on a piece of paper, that is also a written text. So our handwriting is also printed. Printed or written text may be presented in different editions or different typeface. Typeface is the lettering designs. The fonts, what kind of fonts that you use. Is it written in bold, italic, or uppercase, etc.? Or maybe in different sizes of paper, etc. And then for the example of written text is novels, newspapers, blogs, or maybe digital written text such as blog or journal articles. And the next is the form. In spoken discourse, there are differences in dialects, accents, as well as registers, depending on the speech topic. And then the syntax of spoken language is typically much less structured than written language. Spoken language typically contains many incomplete sentences or simple sequences of phrases and rather little subordination. So this is the opposite of written text or written discourse. And then the speaker may produce many fillers, such as, well, I think, or you know, if you see what I mean, etc. For the written discourse, written language contains an extensive set of markers to mark relationships between clauses. So the syntax of written language is typically more structured than the spoken text. For example, in written discourse, there are so many temporal markers, such as when, while, or connectors, such as besides, moreover, etc. Written language often contains rather heavily premodified noun phrases. What does that mean? That means the noun phrases that looks very long or very heavy. That is the characteristic of written language. In some ways, speech is actually not so different from writing. There are three ways, such as when people speak, they also produce different kinds of genres, like writing. And then various speeches use different kinds of social languages, just like writing. Speech also promotes particular versions' reality or ideologies. So in writing, there are ideologies behind what is written, but speech also has those kind of particular ideologies or beliefs. However, there are some other ways in which speech is very different from writing. Speech is more interactive, as I have explained to you that we can see the listener's reaction. Therefore, we can adjust what we are saying to them. And we can also ask the audience or the listeners to reply what we have or to respond to our speech. The next, speech tends to be more transient and spontaneous than writing. So in writing, maybe we can make or create a plan or a draft about what we want to write. However, speech tends to be more spontaneous than that. Maybe we can have our plan, but we tend to be more spontaneous about what we are saying to our listener. And then, while some genres like formal speeches and lectures are planned, most casual conversation is just made up as we go along. So not all speech is spontaneous, because formal speeches tend to be planned. However, for a casual speech or casual conversation, it is very spontaneous. And then speech tends to be less explicit than writing. Speech also usually takes place in some kind of physical context. That's all for today. We can continue our discussion in our Google Classroom. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.